This is the Litigator's Edge podcast with your host, Aniket Sawant.
Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the Litigator's Edge, a podcast where innovative attorneys reveal the strategies that have transformed their legal practice. My name is Aniket Sawant, and I'm co-founder and CEO of Threadio. It's my privilege to have Shaunis Mercer as my guest today. Shaunis is the owner of Peaceful Law, a family law practice in the Raleigh area. She also consults for other law firms. Shaunis, thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. I'd like to start by asking you, Shaunis, to please share either a fun fact or a cringe joke. Which will it be and what is it?
Well, it's going to be a fun fact, let's say. Did you know that sharks don't attack attorneys?
No, I did not. Why would that be the case?
Professional courtesy.
Oh, that's a great one. Oh my gosh. It was actually a cringe joke. It was both.
Totally cringe.
That's amazing.
But the setup was the fact.
Yes, absolutely. That was outstanding. So Shaunis, I think of every attorney who makes the time to attend this show as a superhero, and every superhero has an origin story. What's yours?
Sure. My start was kind of interesting. I wasn't sure what I was going to be or what sort of area of law I was going to practice in the beginning. And I went into law school thinking that I was going to be more of a transactional type attorney working in a corporate environment. But then I had the juvenile law clinic where we got to represent juveniles in criminal court in North Carolina. And I got a taste for what it felt like to really advocate for a client who needed representation, and it stuck with me. And that was where I wanted to be. I felt my heart was in helping to protect vulnerable people and be able to help them to find their voice, particularly children.
Very cool. Moving on to your name, your company's name, that is Peaceful Law. It's such a wonderful name for a family law firm. And I think, in my opinion, what makes it even more awesome is that it's a non-obvious one. It's only wonderful looking at it in hindsight. How did you decide on it? And how does that choice of name influence everything that you do?
Yeah, so I started out as a litigator in my career. For the first several years, we handled family law cases the way that most people handle family law cases, which is someone comes into your office, you talk to them about what's going on, and you file a lawsuit asking for all of the things that you would ask for in divorce. So when I started 20 years ago, that was the traditional way that you would begin a family law case. And what I started to realize over my years of practice was that maybe that wasn't the best way to help families to get to a resolution. So, I made the joke earlier about the shark, and that's because when people come in to your office, when they're looking to get a divorce, they're hurt, they're mad, they're sad, they have all sorts of feelings. And one of the common things that people say is that they want a shark or they want a pit bull to be representing them. But what I've found is that sharp approach in how you deal with family issues wasn't always the best way to really get the client what they wanted. Because at the end of the day, even when you won, when you had your day in court, it's for most of my clients felt really bad. And what I found was the cases that I was able to settle outside of court, where we were able to come to a resolution, that my clients were happier that way, that they were able to find that peace that they were seeking because they had more control over the process and they were able to be part of the solution and planning. And truly, I feel like that nobody knows families better than the people that are living in that family. And so giving back that control, I found in keeping the case outside of court was really the way to help these families find peace. So when we were forming our law firm, my husband, by the way, is my law partner. When we were forming the law firm, both of us come from these great litigation backgrounds. I have experience with litigating family law cases, juvenile cases, like I was saying. That's where my heart was helping these people, but I realized that maybe that wasn't the best way to be able to help them. My husband was a career prosecutor. He prosecuted the most serious types of cases that you could. But again, at the end of the day, we found that those cases that we remember as feeling the most rewarding were the ones where we helped our clients achieve peace. So we really wanted to put that at the center of our law firm. And so when we came up with the name Peaceful Law, we felt like that really represented what our goal was for our clients. And what we found is that by saying that up front and saying what it is that we want to achieve, that we really attract the right clients to come to our firm. We're not the right law firm for every single family. Unfortunately, not every family can take a peaceful approach. There are some circumstances that make it hard to start from that place of peace. And we understand that and recognize that. But what we find is that those people who are seeking peace and who want to find that for their families come to us, and we can help them to get there.
That's a wonderful story, Shaunis. Digging down a little bit and becoming a little bit more specific, what's a case or matter that fundamentally drove this approach, this peaceful approach to family law that you now espouse?
So child custody cases, I think, are the prime example of why we do what we do. And that's because for us, we have two children of our own who are 8 and 12. And so really seeing what happens when families can come together and have these conversations about protecting their kids. So that might be a divorce case where people are dealing with child custody issues and figuring out what the right schedule is, figuring out whether a child should take a new medication or play soccer. Like that's not a conversation that you need to have in front of a judge. That's a conversation that parents really need to come together with help sometimes of their attorneys to come up with how those decisions are going to get made and who's going to be responsible for that decision making. We also do estate planning. And so, in the same way that we want to help families to find peace during that period of transition with divorce, we also want for families to be able to leave their kids a legacy of peace so that we don't have a situation where a parent passes and kids aren't sure what their parents would have wanted. And so they're fighting or bickering over things and stuff that their parents have left behind. Or even worse, when something happens tragically to a young family and both parents have passed, and then you've got two sets of grandparents maybe who are fighting because they really think that they know what's best and what their child would have wanted, and they're grieving the loss of a child, and they're dealing with trying to figure out what's going to happen with their grandkids. And so you've taken a family that was peaceful and everything was working, and by not planning ahead, families sometimes unintentionally leave their children and their parents in a place where there's fighting where there shouldn't be. So we're really big about having conversations and sharing with our families what we would want to have happen if someone were to pass, and explaining why. And we find that by having that clarity and by having a plan moving forward, that you can keep peace even in those situations.
Makes a lot of sense. You mentioned in your introduction, Shaunis, that you worked within the juvenile defense system. How did your time there shape your perspective on the family dynamics that you mentioned and the logistics that so often come to the forefront, and also the legal system's impact on those families?
Yeah, so that is a situation when a child has been charged with a crime and they are in being brought into a court system as a juvenile, where there can be a lot of things that open up about a family dynamic that maybe wouldn't have come to light had the child not been introduced into the court system. So dealing with juvenile cases, and in North Carolina, we call those juvenile delinquency cases. What I found was that a lot of times there were families where there were parents who may be separated and had competing opinions on what the right thing was for a child. And so I represented the child's expressed interest in those cases. And so I had the opportunity to advocate for what the child wanted. And sometimes that's the first time that a child's voice has mattered in their life, where parents have been bickering and parents have pulling different ways about what decisions should be made for a child. And this is the first time that child has been empowered with someone who's speaking up for their expressed interest, what they're wanting to have happen. And in seeing how powerful that was to bring families who may have different opinions together when their child's voice was being heard in a courtroom, and to be able to advocate for that, I think really it made me realize that in my family law cases, that a lot of times we don't think about what the child's expressed desires are. And there's a lot of research that's being done about a child's position and what a child's input should be in divorce cases. So that definitely had an impact on the way that I viewed that role of a child in divorce proceedings. And I've got kids. Being in this position in my life, I understand and agree that most of the time, a child should not be having that weight and responsibility of having to say what should happen in their custody case, right? Like they shouldn't have to talk to a judge about that. They shouldn't have to be pulled between their parents. So I think that seeing a child say what it is that they would want to have happen in those juvenile delinquency cases really had an impact on the way that I view what we do to children when we put them in the middle between their two parents in divorce cases.
Yeah, that's such a fascinating insight. If it's the first time that a child has actually been asked what they think and how they're feeling, and that happens to be in such a public and a difficult circumstance, that's fascinating. Shaunis, while you mentioned earlier that your peaceful approach certainly helps in terms of sort of self-selection of clients who may come to you or those who may not, what are some challenges that you might see in implementing your approach when opposing counsel or maybe the other side or even your own client might be just emotionally inclined towards a more adversarial stance, and how do you go about resolving that?
Well, it's really tricky. It's funny because I was at a wedding not long after my husband and I had just formed the firm, and it was a wedding of a young attorney that we've known her entire life, watched her grow throughout her career. And I was standing around, of course, with a bunch of other attorneys and family law attorneys. And one of them turns to me and says, "Peaceful law, that's never going to work. You know that, right?" And I said, I kind of disagree with you there. I wouldn't have staked my family's entire financial future on this idea. So for me, this has to work because my whole family's financial future depends on it. But with that, what I find is when there is an opposing attorney who takes a less peaceful approach, I find that having a direct conversation with them, they know what they're getting when I'm on the other side of a case. They know my experience in litigation. So they know it's not that I'm afraid of a fight. They know that it's not that I lack the understanding of family law cases or what potential outcomes in court would be if we went to court. So I find that when attorneys are reasonable and they know that they're dealing with another experienced attorney, and they know that if they don't handle this case with me, my client will be going to a litigation attorney who may not be so easy to deal with. I find myself to be very easy to deal with in family law cases because my approach is practical problem solving and finding the best result for our clients. And so the choice of the opposing counsel really is they can figure out a way to get to a resolution outside of court, or they can deal with somebody else and they can litigate this case. Luckily, we have a great bar. So most of the time, we get to an amicable resolution. That doesn't mean that we're holding hands at the end of the case. It doesn't mean that we don't have to have some hard conversations. It doesn't mean that people don't try to withhold financial information and we really have to push in order to get what we need. But we can do that by being respectful, by following the rules of professional responsibility and really holding each other accountable to get the job done. So we have lots of tricks up our sleeves if things are dragging out or taking longer than they should to get to a resolution. We use mediation as a tool many times to set that sort of artificial deadline that litigation gives you to get a case settled, right? So in litigation, you've got timelines, you've got discovery deadlines, you've got temporary hearings, permanent hearings that are coming up. So you've got to figure it out, because if not, the court's going to make the choice for you. And so I find that sometimes with more traditional law firms that tend to follow that conveyor belt of litigation approach, that if we can set up similar deadlines in the case from the beginning, that we're able to click over into that mentality of first step, second step, third step to get to a resolution. So sometimes that's not the most efficient way to get there. I would love it. And for most of my cases, I'm able to pick up the phone, call the opposing attorney, and we disclose all of the documents. We've already talked to our clients about that. That's the way that it's going to go. And we set a time when a proposed agreement is going to come over, or when we're going to have a four-way conversation if we're doing formal collaborative law, and we're able to just do that by picking up the phone. But again, not all firms operate the same way. And so when we have a more traditional firm, we take a more traditional, on the other side, we take a more traditional approach in how we handle the case. Now with our clients, reminding them of why they chose us is usually a good tool to get the case focus back to where it needs to be. My clients, aren't free of the emotional problems that come with divorce, but my clients tend to be people who are, have no problem employing other professionals to help us. So many times my clients have therapists. Sometimes my clients have a divorce coach that's working with them. So they are supported by other professionals who will help them to work through that emotional baggage that comes with divorce, so that we can focus on finding clarity on the issues that we need to in order to move the case forward.
That's wonderful. You call yourself on your LinkedIn an innovative solver, and I think a lot of the things that you just shared really do reflect that. Are there any specific examples of where you've taken an innovative approach and that really helped move particularly reticent opposing counsel off of dead center and get your client what they needed and ultimately resolve a matter peacefully?
That's a good question. So perfect example that I am thinking of is where, a lot of times in divorce, we take this approach of buckets of the case, right? So in North Carolina, for instance, our buckets are child custody, child support, spousal support, and equitable distribution. So dividing up the property and those sorts of things. And then we have the alimony spousal support bucket, where we're talking about an ongoing support obligation that a supporting spouse would have to a dependent spouse. So I had an opposing counsel who was just really adamant that their client was feeling very emotional about the idea of having to pay spousal support to a dependent spouse. And, there were reasons behind why they were feeling the way that they were feeling. But again, like, great for the opposing counsel for reaching out to me and just telling me directly, we will not settle this case if there is an alimony obligation. And so as attorneys, we were able to talk, problem solve, and collaborate together about, where this money was going to come from, because her client acknowledged that there was a need for more support, but he wasn't comfortable with paying spousal support. And so we took a look at the numbers. We took a look at the needs of the children. And luckily, both of our clients were very focused on what was best for their kids. And so we were able to find a way to give my client some assurance that everything was going to be okay from a financial standpoint with the kids, and that she was going to be able to provide for her kids in the way that she needed to by adjusting some of those obligations in terms of who was going to be responsible for what with the children. So in this case, the opposing counsel was able to talk to their client about taking on the obligation for paying for college. And in North Carolina, that's not required. So some states have a way for child support to extend beyond when the child graduates from high school or turns 18. North Carolina doesn't. But both parents were child focused and agreed that the best thing was to have college paid for. And there was an understanding that my client was not going to have that ability to do that. So by taking on that college expense and obligation, that relieved the concern from my client that they wouldn't be able to help provide that future that they wanted to have for their child. And for the other side, they were able to feel comfortable that they weren't paying that spousal support that they were uncomfortable paying.
That's a great story. It almost as close to a win-win as you can get in a situation like this. So thank you for sharing that.
Right.
Switching gears a little bit, in addition to obviously your family law practice, you also serve as a consultant to other attorneys and their law firms. Can you speak a little bit more to the work that you do there?
Sure. So I've had the amazing opportunity to work for innovative law firms during my career. I worked for Rosen Law Firm, which was, one of the first law firms to really embrace technology and to create that remote working environment that many of us had to pivot to during COVID. But that's the way that Rosen had been doing business for years before that happened. So I became really comfortable in that environment there, learning how to leverage tech to best serve my clients and to help me to find a quality of life that, as a working mom, that I would not have otherwise been able to have. And then, moving forward from Rosen, I worked for Elise Bowie Family Law, and she is a well-known, innovative family law attorney in Seattle, Washington, who also just works really hard to leverage technology to best serve her team as well as her clients. So when Chris and I decided to start this firm, I really wanted to make sure that we set up this firm. It was almost like an experiment of, how much can we do to leverage technology to use all of these lessons that I've learned to set up our firm in a way that lets us have the quality of life that we want while still being able to serve our clients and have that level of client care that is so important when you're dealing with families. And so in starting to work through, well, what system would we use here? How would we do this? And, really creating those original standard operating procedures that would work in our law firm, I had some conversations with another local attorney, and he asked me, he said, you've worked for these really amazing tech firms. You've worked for these really efficient client-focused firms. Can you help me with my firm? Can you help me to set that up? Is that something you'd be willing to do? And it really evolved into a great relationship. And his name's Jonathan Breeden. Breeden Law Firm is a well-known litigation family law firm here in North Carolina. Again, like very different. We have very different approaches to family law cases, but we are aligned in what we believe in terms of client care. And we both have that, growth mindset of like, how can we do better to make our firms run better, make our team happier, and make our clients happier. So I started working with him, and he very graciously introduced me to some of his other friends in a management program that he's a part of, and I've been able to work with a few other clients as well, just to help problem solve. I think that the innovative solver piece for me is really important to what I bring to the table, and so I love being able to help law firms who maybe have some ideas of what they would want to do, or maybe they already have systems in place and just want a fresh set of eyes to help them to figure out how to do things differently or a different approach that they might consider.
Very cool. When you work with law firms like the Breeden firm and others, what are some typical challenges or blind spots that you have seen law firm owners bring you in for or try to work through themselves? And what sort of approach do you take when you look at evaluating potential innovations that might help them solve those problems? And those innovations could be technology, or they could be process, or a mixture of both.
Yeah, so I think that law firms are notoriously inefficient, right? It's just one of the big blind spots in law is that we do get really stuck in the way that things always have been, and that there have to be these steps because there always have been these steps. It's, the old story about the daughter who was helping her mom cook Thanksgiving dinner, and her mom cut the ends off of both ends of the ham and
right.
Asked why she did that, and it's because, well, I didn't have a pan that was big enough. But we just keep doing the same things that we've always done because we assume that there's a good reason for doing it. So it doesn't matter what the process is. It could be the way that we handle intake, that step one is that we send this intake form no matter what in every single case. And we don't ever question why we do that or how the client may feel when they've had a whole conversation with somebody, answered all of these questions already, and then they get a form that's asking for that same stuff again. And so I think really coming in as an outsider and just saying, like, why do we do that? Is the most useful tool to help figure out what really is a necessary part of the process versus what do we just do because of tradition or because when we started, that's what we needed to do.
Makes sense. From your vantage point, as you look at the work that you've done with firms today, and as you look at technology as it's progressing at the moment, where do you see the biggest opportunities for innovation in law firm operations over the next 3 to 5 years? Obviously, we had the opportunity to connect at ABA Tech Show. AI is all over the place. What are your views on where things are headed based on what you see?
Well, I think that the law firms who are willing to embrace technology are the law firms that are going to be able to have a competitive advantage in the market. It's just the reality that we're dealing with. Like this is the technology. If you don't learn it, if you don't figure out how to become more efficient for your clients, then you're going to get left behind because other people are going to be able to keep their clients happier by leveraging technology. They're going to be able to charge lower prices, and attorneys don't like to talk about money, but it's the truth, right? If they are providing a better product and doing it for a lower cost, you're going to get left behind. So they're going to do better with their networking referral sources because they're going to nurture those relationships better by using technology. So all of these things that you may think give you the superior edge and that you'll be able to keep doing things the way that you've always done them, they can all be improved and be better served by embracing technology. And so for me, that does mean getting comfortable with AI and being able to figure out the best ways to use AI in your practice. So I think that there's sort of two different camps of people when it comes to AI, right? Like there's the people who want to make AI be able to replace attorneys in their office. And there are the people who want to embrace AI in order to make it more efficient for their staff and to do those jobs that really we don't want to do. It's the same thing in our personal life, right? Like I don't want AI to take away my ability to write like a creative, fun poem for my kid's birthday party. I want for AI to do the dishes. I want for AI to like organize my grocery list so that I don't have to think about it. I want for it to do the things that I don't want to do. And so in my law firm, in my opinion, that's where we should be focused is how can AI do that lifting of the tasks that nobody in our law firm wants to do? And so in my firm and in my consulting world, I'm working to develop tools that make things more efficient for my team and make sure that things don't get missed, right? So the things that can provide backup and redundancies that are going to better serve my clients.
That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned that Peaceful Law is an endeavor that you and your husband started. You have 2 kids. You also do this consulting for technology and process consulting for attorneys on the side. How do you balance all of that? How do you manage all of that as a family, as 2 professionals who also happen to have kids? How does that work while maintaining the high quality of life that you want?
Yeah. Very carefully, with constant communication. We don't get it right every time. And I think that that's really important to acknowledge that we struggle with the same things that other law firm owners have struggles with. Sometimes I work late. Sometimes my husband has to, at the last minute, take over doing a work project because I'm promised to be somewhere else. So we do deal with those things, but by having open communication with one another, constant communication about what's happening, using technology in order to do that, right? Like Slack channels. I don't know many husband and wives that communicate over Slack, but we do. It works for us.
That's awesome.
So using our skylight in our kitchen that has our work schedules, our family schedules, everything there in sort of a central location as a tool where the kids can know, like during this conversation, I told you at the beginning of the call, I'm working from home today and we've got yard work happening at a neighbor's house. And so I'm in my son's, actually his podcast production space in his bedroom. And so he came in, he saw that there was a note that I was on a podcast, through communication that we had. And so he was careful when he came in, but he's come in and gotten what he needs and moves. So it's the whole family that has to learn how to communicate, respect what the other needs are, the competing needs in our family, and just be really understanding of that. And then communicating when things aren't working. And just a lot of grace and forgiveness, I think, when we do get it wrong, and a willingness to assume positive intent, that we really are united in what this goal is for our family, for our clients, for our firm, And so we both show up knowing that the other person, whether it's that they aren't able to make it to school pickup on time and that the other parent has to step in, we believe that the reason why they didn't make it to school pickup on time was because when they were acting, they did it because they believed that that was the best thing that had to be done. And I think if you approach it that way, you can avoid a lot of the resentment, bitterness that steps in when you're having to pick up slack for one another. And we just work really hard at being open and transparent about those things.
That's beautiful. So it's so nice to see, living sort of the life that you counsel your clients to also live, which is really nice. This has been a wonderful conversation, Sean. It's just a couple of quick questions to wrap it up. If you could go back and give advice to yourself as a junior attorney, just starting off in her career, what would it be?
Oh, don't be so hard on yourself. I went to a swearing-in ceremony today for an attorney who was being sworn into the North Carolina bar, and we were sort of swapping war stories. I actually returned to the county where I first started practicing with my boss from the first firm that I was at. So we were sort of joking around, like, Shaunis, I sent her in to try this domestic violence protective order the first day that she was sworn in. And I remember that day, and I was so hard on myself for not knowing all of the answers and for not just being great immediately. But I always kept my clients' interest at heart. I always wanted to do the best that I could for them. And I think that I would go back and tell myself that, that is so much, and that is that I serve my clients well. I think I would give that reassurance to myself.
It's wonderful. Final question for you, Shaunis. What is a question that I should have asked you, but I didn't?
Okay. You should have asked me, what's next for Peaceful Law?
Yes, what is next for Peaceful Law?
So Peaceful Law is growing. We have had just amazing results in the first year and a half that we've been practicing, so that we have the need to expand. And we're really excited about being able to serve more clients, have more space to meet with our clients in person, to host mediations. And so we are expanding from our one office in Holly Springs, North Carolina, to add an office in Cary, North Carolina, and an office at the corner of Durham and Chapel Hill. So now we have offerings for physical office space to meet with clients across the triangle, and hopefully more to come, so that our clients across North Carolina can get to see us in person a little bit more often.
That's wonderful. Well, congratulations on the expansion. All the very best, and we'll be keeping tabs on Peaceful Law as it grows and expands to even greater and greater heights. Thank you so much, Sean. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I'm sure our audience will enjoy it as well. All the best.
Thank you.
Take
It was
care.
so good to talk to you.
Thank you. Take care.
See you soon.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Litigator's Edge podcast, brought to you by Threadio.